But first, the UN Security Council has called an emergency meeting to discuss the deadly clashes between Palestinians and Israeli troops. At least 16 people have been killed and hundreds are injured after Israeli forces fired live rounds at protesters along the Israeli-Gaza border. Thousands marched there this Friday in what's been dubbed the Great March of Return. The demonstration commemorates Land Day, which took place on March 30th, 1976, when 6 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces after protesting Israel's expropriation of Palestinian land.
The tension in the air along Gaza's border with Israel is palpable. In what's set to be a 6-week sit-in, Palestinians have set up 5 protest locations along the Gaza Strip's border with Israel. The militant group Hamas that controls Gaza says these demonstrations are only the start. Casualties were reported and hundreds of Palestinians were injured after clashes broke out. March 30th is known as Land Day and commemorates the killing of 6 unarmed Arab citizens of Israel who were killed by Israeli forces in the northern city of Galilee in 1976.
Whether it's today, tomorrow, or the day after that, we will go back to Beit Ras and we will go back to Palestine and we will free the Al-Aqsa Mosque and we will free all of Palestine, God willing.
Israel, meanwhile, has beefed up its security presence along the Gaza border. Tanks and hundreds of snipers have been deployed on either side, and troops use tear gas and live fire to push back protesters. The Israeli military said it used riot dispersal means only on the protests' main instigators, adding some were rolling burning tires and hurling stones at soldiers.
Hamas and other organizations called for protests, calling it the March of Return. However, as events are taking place on the ground, it looks more like the March of Chaos. There are protests and aggressive riots. The Israeli Defense Forces resisted it by using methods that break up protests.
Palestinians are set to continue demonstrating until the middle of May, drawing attention to the fact that hundreds of thousands were displaced with the creation of Israel.
Thousands of Palestinians in Gaza have marched on the Israeli border at the start of a 6-week protest. They're demanding that some residents be allowed to return to homes that are now in Israel. At least 15 Palestinians have been killed and a reported 1,000 injured in clashes with the Israeli Defense Force. That's according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. A 16-year-old boy is said to be among the dead. The Israeli military oversees a no-go zone along the border with Gaza, citing security concerns. Palestinians have pitched 5 camps near the border, seen here in yellow. Israel has deployed tanks and snipers and is using tear gas to force Palestinians away. The BBC's Yolande Nell is in Jerusalem.
A chaotic rush to the hospital, with hundreds of Palestinians injured in Gaza. A call for peaceful marches turned to violence as protesters headed towards the Israeli border. Israel's military says it used tear gas and opened fire to stop anyone illegally crossing into its territory or attacking soldiers. And this was just the start. Palestinians are planning a series of protests until mid-May. That will be 70 years on from the creation of the State of Israel. Palestinians see it as their catastrophe when hundreds of thousands of people fled their homes. And many here have never given up their claim to the land.
We are here to stress our right to return. Sooner or later, we must go back.
But Israel says Gaza's leaders are cynically exploiting ordinary people to stir up unrest.
Hamas and other Palestinian groups are calling their protest the March of Return. However, as events unfold, it's the March of Chaos. These are aggressive riots.
Gazan families are now being urged to stay at protest camps along the Israeli border. And that will ensure that tensions here remain high in the weeks ahead. Yolande Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has said Israel is responsible for the 15 deaths. In a televised statement, Mr. Abbas called on the UN to intervene.
I, faced with this sad event, place full responsibility on the Israeli authorities for the loss of the martyrs who were killed today, following the firing of the occupation army against the popular and peaceful protests which came out to commemorate this anniversary and to take back its right in self-determination like other countries around the world. I've asked the United Nations today for immediate action to provide international protection for our Palestinian people facing this continuous and escalating daily aggression.
Mahmoud Abbas there. Well, a spokesman for the Israeli Prime Minister tweeted, Hamas terrorists send thousands of Palestinians, some armed, to cross the border fence between Gaza and Israel in order to infiltrate our lands and kill our citizens. Every country has the right to defend its borders and people from a brutal terrorist organisation. That was a tweet from a spokesman for the Israeli Prime Minister.